Hi everyone, today I'm going to be discussing dictators and their favorite sports. I'll be selecting a few dictators from throughout history and talking about how they may have used sport during their rule of their countries, whether or not they use their sport for different influence or just that they enjoyed a sport and enjoyed showing that off to their populace. Now before I get started, if you do enjoy sports and history, please subscribe for 2 videos a month on sports, history, and usually politics. So let's get started. Now, I'm going to start off with a quick disclaimer for this video. I have chosen very controversial and horrible people to talk about. I'm not praising what they have done in any way or making light of any of the atrocities that these people have committed to their countries or humanity in general. All I want to do in this video is show how some dictators use sport for their own political advantages and in an effort to control their countries or make themselves as men look more superior. I just wanted to clarify that before we begin. Now, the first dictator I'm going to be talking about today is Fidel Castro of Cuba. I'm going to do a quick overview of how he became a dictator because it does kind of come into play with some stuff I mention about him later. So Cuba was invaded by the US in 1989, and then they set up a puppet government for the country in 1902. Later in 1952, the president of Cuba, who was technically himself a dictator, was running the country into the ground, all with America economically, politically, and militarily supporting that government. Cue the revolution. Fidel Castro, amongst many others, got together and took back control of their country. And thus began the deterioration of the relationship between Cuba and the US to kind of what we see between the two countries today. All because America supported a corrupt government, and then when it was overthrown, he threw a tantrum basically. Moral of the story, the US only supports dictators that they appoint in other countries. Now, Castro in his youth was an accomplished high school athlete. He played tennis, baseball, basketball, and competed in track and field. Now, I'll be focusing more on basketball than baseball, which is what Cuba is kind of known for more now, because that's a whole other video itself. Now, after he came into power in the country, Castro really wanted sports to be accessible for all citizens, as they were a right to the people, but also physical strength helped build a strong nation, and he really wanted to start this with the youth of the nation. He also thought that sports would be an equalizing factor between classes, but favored a lot of the lower class athletes in sport because of their strong will and work ethic. Castro would continue to play basketball into his political career. He played during state visits, in private, and also with a bunch of random kids on the street. Now, Castro loved the sport of basketball, and this particularly boosted the popularity of the sport within the country. Now, because of this, throughout the 70s, Cuba became very good at basketball internationally. In 1970, the Cuban national team got 3rd at the University Games. In 1972, they won bronze at the Olympic Games, and in 1974, they came in 4th place at the Basketball World Championships. Now, one of their biggest successes was in 1971. They beat the United States at the Pan American Games, which was pretty huge because at this point the relationship between the two countries was fairly strained, and the US was known as kind of being one of the world's best basketball nations, and for kind of one of their sworn enemies to beat them at one of what they considered was their best sports was kind of a hit below the belt for them, so to speak. Because of this, they're actually the only Caribbean nation to win an international basketball title. And for such a small country to win a medal at the Olympic Games, for example, showed that Cuba and Castro really put a lot of effort into developing this basketball program for the country. But as the country was succeeding at basketball, in 1982, Castro gave up the game when he broke his toe during a heated match with kind of some random people, probably some friends and other state officials. Not because this injury was career-ending by any means, but because he got really upset, I guess, at the game or at the people he was playing with, and he didn't want to play basketball anymore, and nor did he really want his country to continue playing basketball anymore because of that. Like other dictators I will discuss later, Castro showed off his athleticism whenever he could, which also meant that he would kind of play games of basketball or pickup games on the street with lots of kids. There was always cameras on him when he was playing. There was a lot of propaganda images showing him playing basketball. So because of Castro's broken toe in the 1980s, the popularity of basketball dropped and the country favored their national sport of baseball. That's how Castro's favorite sport for a short period of time influenced the country and helped lead that country to success in the 70s. So the next dictator I'm going to talk about is Vladimir Putin. So if you don't hear from me for a while, the Russian government got a hold of this video of me calling him a dictator. Now, yes, the man has technically been democratically elected to his position of president of Russia, but he has been sitting in office for a very, very long time. In the last election in 2018, he got 76% of the vote, which is a lot for a free democratic country. Now, Russia isn't an official dictatorship by any means, but Putin's government has poisoned and arrested his opposition multiple times. There are multiple cases of old government officials or people who speak out against the current Russian government mysteriously ending up being poisoned. And also, his current opposition has very recently been arrested for some really dumb parole violation and has been sentenced to jail. So I'm going to include him in this list because of that. Now, Putin is, or has been considered, a Renaissance man. He's ex-KGB, as in ex-Soviet/Russian secret government service. He's a judo champion, highest score scholar in his hockey league, horse rider, and national treasure, I guess. Now, his first love was judo when he started taking classes at the age of 11. 10 years later, he would actually become a judo master. He also does karate, where he is at his 8th dan. He loves to watch football, he loves to fish, hike, riding horses half naked, and he loves racing cars as well. Also loves to try out lots of new sports and hiring the country's best coaches essentially to teach him. He took up downhill skiing, and his personal coach was a famous downhill skier and former president of the Russian Olympic Committee. After one practice session, the man said that Putin is above average on the hill. Probably above average on the little bunny hill, but there's no photo evidence of that. However, Putin's best sport is a new one for him, and it is ice hockey. In 2011, Putin told some random children that he would learn how to skate, so he, of course, got one of the best skating / ex-NHL players to teach him. He also learned how to play ice hockey as well. Once he learned how to play hockey, he created a whole new ice hockey league in Russia, the Russian Night Hockey League, so that he could show off his skills. Similar to Castro showing off his physical abilities to portray strength and power to his subjects. Now, they do play for lots of charities in Russia, so it's not totally selfish, but it's still a little self-serving. In this league, you have different businessmen, politicians, lots of ex-NHLers, and of course, Putin's team has the best of the best that you can find. I'm sure some of you have seen possible footage of Putin playing this game of ice hockey against professionals where he scores like 7 goals and he's literally got a 6-foot COVID bubble around him because no one goes anywhere near him. Now, in 2019, he actually joined an exhibition tournament against lots of former NHL players again. It was the 7th year he joined and competed. Now, at the age of 66, he scored 8 or 10 goals, depending on if you listen to the Kremlin or other news sources, against NHL goalies. Now, like I said, he usually has a big 6-foot COVID bubble around him. They don't touch the president on the ice because they're probably terrified of hurting him and ending up being mysteriously poisoned later on because of it. Now, Putin's effect on the nation's sports in general is pretty big. He's always been very supportive of Russia going to the Olympic Games, Russia going and representing the country and being very successful in that representation. They always do really, really well at the Winter Olympics, and Putin has always really supported Russia doing that, including running state-sponsored doping programs, probably. He really wants the country and its athletes to be successful. Now on to one of the world's probably worst dictators is Mao Zedong of China. Now, Mao Zedong led the communist revolution in China and ruled the nation from 1943 to his death in 1976. He also led the world in human rights atrocities, a war that took thousands of lives, and establishing a really dodgy government that is still really dodgy today. Much of what is known about Mao Zedong is a little different depending on the sources that you read. Anything from the state or probably his early life has been tampered or manipulated with in some way. but some sources tend to be a little bit more truthful than others. Now, a fair bit is known about his early life. Now, growing up, he was a huge fan of swimming, and he learned how to swim in a pond on his father's land. Now, his love of swimming would be with him throughout his entire life. While he was in power, many elite sporting schools were created, as they tend to be in dictator states. Now, some of these schools are actually elite swimming schools as well. Now, swimming in China has always been seen as a symbol of physical strength, and its influence can kind of be pinpointed from Mao himself due to his love of the sport. And this is why you also see so many packed swimming pools in China in particular. Now, one story involved with his love of swimming involves a visit from Soviet dictator Nikita Khrushchev. So in 1958, they held a state meeting in a swimming pool because Mao knew the Soviet couldn't swim. So while Mao was just doing laps during the state meeting, Khrushchev was apparently holding on to a life jacket at the end of the pool. Now, he did this because on a previous visit to the Soviet Union, he felt as though he was disrespected for some reason. So he thought, what better way to get back than to show Khrushchev something that I'm really good at that I know that you're not really good at. Now, more politically speaking, Mao did use his skill and love of swimming for specific propaganda reasons. In 1966, the ailing dictator was 63 years old, and there had been a lot of questions and rumblings about the man's health in the country, including multiple versions of STIs, health problems, weight problems, you name it. Lots of different things were swirling around internationally and within the country as well. So he decided to swim on the Yangtze River to prove to the world and to his country that he was still fit and healthy and capable in leading the country. He also swam in 2 other major rivers in China as well. Now, of course, he did this against most advice from his bodyguards, physicians, and fellow politicians. However, after finishing swimming in the Yangtze River, the state released some information about it, including the speed at which he completed his task. Now, he reportedly swam 9 miles in 65 minutes. At this pace, he would have beaten most world record holders in swimming at the time, but also consider he was on the river, so the current probably helped out a little bit. When he completed swimming all 3 rivers, he inspired much of the nation to pick up the sport, as swimming was seen kind of like fighting against nature, and it was seen as a very powerful sport and a way to kind of toughen yourself up in the cold rivers and seas. Now, the popularity of the sport increased, and long after his death, the country is still fairly successful in the sport and usually takes home a couple of medals every year at the Olympic Games. In 2008, they came in 7th overall in swimming. In 2012, they came in 2nd overall in medals in swimming. And as early as 2016, they came in 6th. That's how this dictator used swimming as his favorite sport as international propaganda, trying to show the world that he was still a strong man who could still lead a country by swimming across a big river. So there are a handful of a dictator's favorite sports and how they use them within their countries for political, social, or I'm a manly man reasons. It goes to show how sports are pretty much always political and can always be used for political and or propaganda purposes. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos, I'm hoping to do a part 2 of this series because unfortunately there are many more dictators that are in the world, and they all seem to have liked a sport or one sport at some point in their lifetimes. Please subscribe to see another part or some other videos you may be interested in. Thanks for watching. Bye.